Oh, mate, we're going live. I want that out of the frame. Okay. Are we live? I think we are. Happy days. Okay. Hello, everyone. Where are you tuning in from? Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It's 8:30 in the morning here. We've got ourselves a nice coffee, ready for this chat with you all. Hope to see as many as you as we can whilst we're in here today, and as much interaction going as possible. This is our first sort of time setting it up here, and so hopefully you can hear us well. Let us know if there's any problems, connection issues, things like that. And hopefully I've got the mixer here. I've been designated as the DJ today, so hopefully we can get things sorted out as quickly as possible. So
okay, so the subject today is that about a week ago, China closed its borders to foreigners. So previous to that, they were still allowing foreigners to enter, but they were putting them through a 14 days quarantine. And they changed that decision to say that no foreigners or resident permit holders were allowed to enter the mainland. Personally, I think this is a little bit of a strange decision, as most of the people coming back to China, I think between 80 and 85% were Chinese nationals coming back. So I do think it a little bit strange that they took that decision, but I can understand why. I think it's down to the fact that the authorities in China felt they'd got things under control here, and that a lot of foreign governments didn't have things under control. A lot of the measures abroad didn't seem to be following the WHO's advice and
not quite
locking down.
Not quite the same as everything was.
So I think they were really quite worried about cases coming back in. But this raises, many issues really, and we experienced some of those issues on our recent trip to Shanghai, didn't we?
We did, yeah. We'll get into some of our own experiences from Shanghai and whatever, but definitely this is not a decision that was taken lightly by the Chinese government. One of the things that is very strange about this is most of the people coming back, I don't know if you just mentioned that, but most of the people
about
coming
80
back
to 85%
are Chinese nationals. So, but there is definitely two ways of looking at it, because firstly you've got the just the people who can't come in obviously feel slightly discriminated against, because there's people that might be much higher risk and they're allowed back into China, but they're not, and that poses a big issue really.
I guess ultimately it's down to the fact that, as a country, you can't stop your nationals coming back in.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just want to explore some different reasons why. I just wonder whether it was that because obviously there's a lot of countries out there that have kind of not the best healthcare systems. And I wonder if they were worried about getting people thinking, it's breaking out here. Let's get to China.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. However, maybe one way of sort of stopping that from happening is not sort of process new visas, but maybe people who already had them. But like you said, the same might apply.
Yeah,
even all the people that have them already might want to come back to China.
Sure, but what you got to remember is because China is such a big country, I would imagine worldwide there's literally tens of millions of visas in
True.
Live visas, and I guess they could have, you did see it with a number of actual Chinese nationals who sort of started to get worried being abroad and thought, we'll go back to China because they perceived it safer. And in reality, then, because it's been bought under control here, although a lot of Westerners don't believe that it's been bought under control here. From what I see, I know personally two people who are in Hubei province, and I've spoken to them on a fairly regular basis. And they've sort of given me situation reports that, it was pretty bad. Initially when it all kicked off, they couldn't cope. They shipped a huge amount of medical personnel there. They mobilized a lot of equipment, and they did get it under control. And pretty much outside of Hubei, because they did the sort of lockdowns and all the measures they took, from what I see, they have brought it under control. And I think they were extremely worried about not just foreigners coming back and bringing in, but also Chinese nationals. Chinese nationals have to quarantine. And I think another thing that I've sort of picked up on, and this might be why there's some discrimination happening here. I've read reports that some foreigners don't want to kind of obey the rules. As you know, Chinese, they're very follow what the government tells them to do.
Yeah.
You've only got to look at what's been happening. I believe it was a sunny day in England yesterday.
Yeah.
They've got a park, 300 or 400 people there. They've got people picnicking on the beach and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Even though they've been told to. So I think that authorities are kind of worried that foreigners were going to come back in and flout the rules.
Do that sort of
which,
stuff.
It only takes a couple of cases to start it rampant again.
To be honest, I hadn't really thought of that point, to be fair, because they will have obviously seen all over the media abroad, which like the people outside of China aren't obeying the rules and the advice. And they obviously thought that they were going to bring that mindset here and sort of go out, even though they knew they had a fever or whatever, and start sort of spreading it to other people.
Yeah, I read news a few days ago that I think the piece of news I read was 2 foreigners had been expelled because they would not obey by the rules that were implemented. And I think from a point of view of Chinese here, as I say, we're going to a little bit more in a minute, but there is some sort of discrimination taking place now against foreign nationals here in China. And I can't help wondering if some of that is sparked by that the Chinese people, not the Chinese government, but the Chinese people are seeing these sort of reports coming from abroad. And it's like, in their mind, look, foreigners are not responsible.
Yeah, that's definitely could be a part of it.
And I think that is an issue. I read some news today that in America, they finally decided to the CDC had finally decided to advise the population to start wearing masks.
Finally.
Yeah, finally. Yet the president there
that's
says,
unbelievable.
You don't really need to. It's kind of voluntary and I'm not going to bother. And I think in any situation like this, you really need to lead from the front. And China did that massively. They led from the front. They says, right, these are the rules, and they enforce them, and they enforce them strictly. And that's what I see is not happening in other countries. Not all of the countries.
Turn that down. I can hear a bit of audio.
But other countries, okay, yeah. I'm just wondering.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, I couldn't get over that yesterday. Don't worry about it. I can read them off here.
Yeah, okay.
That was one thing that I just couldn't get over.
Sorry about this. That's it.
Okay. That was one thing that I just couldn't get over yesterday when I heard that bit of news where it's like he's the top guy of the country of the biggest economy in the world, one of the most influential people worldwide, should be setting an example, and he's there going, well, it's only voluntary. You only got to do it if you want to, because I'm not going to be. So it's just absolutely absurd that this guy is one of the biggest world leaders saying something like that.
And I picked this up. In times of crisis, people do turn to the leadership. I've spoken to a number of people in the UK as Boris Johnson, the government have told us to do this. So a lot of time they will only do what the government sort of tells them. And I see there's a little bit of backlash now. There's a large event in the UK called Cheltenham Races. And it's an event that's held every year. It's basically a horse race meeting. But over a 4-day period of this event, there's about 250,000 people attend this event.
All over the UK.
And they come from all over the UK, especially from Ireland as well, because a lot of people in Ireland are into horse racing. And maybe even people from Europe. And when they knew that was coming, I personally believe that should have been cancelled. I think that would have been a very sensible thing, because they say 250,000 people in a 4-day period, all shoulder to shoulder. They all go and socialise in pubs and restaurants and bars after the event. And there's been a lot of criticism now sort of levelled at the organisers for going ahead, because it apparently turns out some of the organisers, people involved in the organisation, were all, even at that time, getting some mild symptoms. And yet they've turned around and says, well, we followed government advice, which is
that's
fair,
the point I made before, because just to add to that, it's like if the organisers know that that's a very, very profitable event, all it comes down to is their morals. And if it's the government that don't shut it down, then people who have slightly less morals and are thinking more of the dollar signs, then they're going to go ahead with it. Because it would be a massive loss, and they might even get a lot of stick for not holding it if the government didn't tell them to shut it down. If it was just the organisers who said, look, we're going to take it on our own back to cancel this event, we don't feel it's a good thing to do, they might get lots of stick, because the people who want to go are like, oh, you could have gone along with it because the government didn't tell you need to shut it down.
Yeah, that's right. I just find it kind of unbelievable that a lot of these countries, I talk more about the UK because that's where I'm from, that they saw the problems they had in China. Yeah, they saw the WHO was sort of giving out warnings for numerous weeks before this hit the shores of some of these European countries. And I don't understand why they didn't act quicker. And I strongly believe the reason why it got contained as well as it did in China is because as soon as they realized, there'll be a lot of criticism that they didn't act fast enough. And that's something that can be looked at after the event. But from what I see, once they realized that there was a lot of person-to-person transmission, they took a pretty big step to shut down a massive part of the Chinese economy. Well, and then later on, all of the Chinese economy. And I often wonder whether in the UK and other European countries, they were scared to do that because, China from a financial point of view is probably a lot stronger than many countries.
Yeah.
And I just wonder whether those countries were like scared of wrecking their economy. But ultimately, I think they're paying a higher price now. Because they're having to deal with a huge amount more cases. I mean, just that one event at Cheltenham probably contributed to spreading that virus all around the UK.
Without a doubt.
People come from it. You've only got to have 1 or 2 people from that event gone back to their respective towns and villages all around the UK. The ripple effect,
that could have been tens of thousands over a month. Oh, definitely. 100%.
These kind of events are where it's passed on. And going back to the mask still, I don't think they've advised mask wearing in the UK, which I do also find really strange.
Yeah, thankfully, because of us being here and what we've been telling the family and stuff like that, most of the people that our loved ones and stuff are taking our advice because we've seen what it's like here. But even then, it takes some persuading, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because it's just, I just don't know what it is. It's just not in the mindset of Westerners or a lot of countries outside of China to wear face masks or something like this. One thing I found unbelievable, what I've seen quite a few people comment is, well, we've been told from the government that washing hands is a better prevention than wearing a mask. As if like these two things are mutually exclusive. It's like, even if wearing a mask is just 5% effective,
sure,
which the surgical ones, the really thin ones, are probably not that effective, but the better ones, like the N95 ones, they're going to be pretty effective. I'm sure. And there's a lot of medical research to back that up.
I mean, okay, they might not stop the virus, but because of the size of the particle size, but I think, and it shows you in Asia, if you look at Asian countries in general, not just China, Asian countries tend to have got the thing a little bit more under control and the spread's less. You look at the European countries and the USA, and it's absolutely running rampant there. And I think that's because there's obviously a lot more community spread. One, because people had, went for 2 or 3 weeks when it was there without doing anything about it, because the governments didn't do anything or did very little. And two, because there's no mask wearing. So you have maybe community workers. And another one, this just come into my head. There's still a lot of internal flights going around in the US.
Oh, I had a look at Flight Tracker and it blew my mind how it must be like at least 50% of the world's flights are internally
in
right
the
now
US.
in the US.
And a lot of the air crew for various airlines have been saying, look, they just don't have the protective equipment. And because of the way the companies operate over there, they're basically saying, look, if we go off sick, we don't get pay. So some of them are actually going to work with a flipping 90% thought that they've actually got the virus and serving passengers on planes. So those people saying flying from, I don't know, New York to San Francisco or wherever, they're getting infected on the plane, landing in San Francisco, then passing it on to even more people there. So, this business where Trump goes, oh, well, we shut down the flights from China. Yeah, but the virus is already in the country. And you're spreading it around even more there. So it doesn't really matter whether you shut the flights down. In fact, there's so much. It's in pretty much every country. I don't even know if there's any countries now where they don't have a case.
And even if there are, I think it might just because they just don't have the facilities to be testing them and
well, this is something that really worries me. If you look at the chart, I get a sort of update every day from somewhere in China on WeChat, and it shows you all the countries and all the cases, the new cases, the confirmed cases, etc., deaths recovered. And if you look at the African countries, they have a very strange lack of cases. And I can't believe for 1 minute that the cases are not there, because if you look at parts of Africa, there's a huge amount of Chinese travel. China have a lot of business with African countries.
Right.
And there's a lot of Chinese who are out in Africa. And there's one particular country, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but they even have a big contact with Wuhan for mining. And yet they have almost, virtually no reported cases. And I think that is down to tests. And again, the WHO have been appealing for people to sort of donate, other countries, rich countries, donate resources and money to help those countries.
Just a quick mention, Solar Flare, thank you very much for your generosity there.
Appreciate that, Solar Flare.
Just to let you know, if you do want to add a question into your super chat, as it says at the top there, we will be discussing it in depth. So, if you want to ask us anything about sort of what we're talking about, something you want us to expand on, then absolutely go ahead there. So I just want to kind of pull it in a little bit because sort of get back to what we were originally talking about. So,
talk about us going to Shanghai and the issues around there.
You obviously know we've been saying on community posts and videos that recently we went to Shanghai about a week ago. We got back, and we were aware at this time that there was going to be some issues, and we could run into some sort of problems because of being foreigners and traveling, and the heightened alert about it at the moment. So what we did, we got 2 laminated cards of information, and we basically put, our address, our name. We translated it all into Chinese, where we've been, because we've both been in the country for at least 2 months at this point. So obviously the incubation period would have passed, and we've been just in China. Anyway, we did run into a couple of sort of problems in China, and some, a lot of people, call us out for being China shills and all of this. And that is because they think we're just pro-China. But sometimes most of the time, it's just that we're presenting the other side of the story. But this is definitely going to be one occasion where, this is something I'm not so pleased with. And there is definitely a rising issue here. Because I was the first to stick up for Chinese people who were in the West when this virus was only in China, and people were contacting me from back home saying that Chinese people were getting discriminated against. I had one friend that said he was waiting at a bus stop and there was 2 Chinese people there, just students, and everyone sort of left the bus stop, and then some people started name calling them, saying, "Oh, China virus, coronavirus," and I was the first to say that is just disgusting.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's nothing to do with race. They might have been in England for 5-10 years. You never know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have noticed. I've been on the metro, and there's one time where a guy did move, but generally I've not had a huge amount of issue. I can tell people sort of look a bit more nervous when I get on.
Especially when we got onto the plane, because we were the only foreigners on
right. And I think some of the issues we experienced in Shanghai was because you were not able to get the Alipay health code.
Yeah, so let's just outline what they were to start with. So we were checking into multiple different hotels because, as we previously said in a video, our plan when we were going there was to do five-star hotels in 5 days because they're very cheap at the moment. So we wanted to sort of have that experience. Anyway, every hotel took us, the most part of 45 minutes, sometimes longer to check in because they had to make all sorts of phone calls, check our documents and things like that.
Let me just stop you there. It seemed to vary from one hotel to another.
Yeah.
Because we had one hotel, we had two hotels flatly refuse us.
Yeah.
Down to you not being able to produce a Alipay health code. But yet we had another hotel where we went, and they said, it's no problem. All we need to do is phone the Chinese CDC with your passport details, and they'll give us the okay. And that was a fairly seamless process.
Yeah.
So it tended to, and it makes me think it really comes down to the actual people on the ground you're dealing with, rather than the overall policy. I think different people interpret the rules very differently.
Yeah.
Because we had one instance in the Jin Mao Tower, didn't we, where they just flatly refused, even though I could show them a health code. They then said, only people with a Chinese ID card. First they said no foreigners, didn't they? And I says, but look, I have my Alipay health code. Just to clarify, I have an Alipay health code, but Ollie doesn't.
So this Alipay health code is basically the requirement to be able to get into, certain places when you're out and about. And they do differ in different provinces. So I have the one in Shenzhen because that's where we live. And you don't need a bank account linked with it.
Yeah, hang on. I just clarified that. So each province or city has its own code. So here in Shenzhen, we have something called iShenzhen. But the code they seem to use more nationally is the Alipay health code.
Right.
Yeah.
I just, we'll get back to that. Just a quick shout out to JG54 Serpent Blade. Thank you very much for your donation.
Appreciate that.
Just quickly as well, if you do like the stream, please give it a like because it does help it to get spread out there on the browse page on YouTube. That would be greatly appreciated. So you're going to have this Alipay health code. And to have this Alipay health code, you must have a Chinese bank account. And there's many tourists here who don't have a Chinese bank account, right? So this is my critique with that critique even, is that, there's I don't know, there must be tens of thousands of tourists here that aren't able to get that. So
there are, but I think, it is a good point. If you're here as a tourist and you don't have a Chinese bank account, and that's something they perhaps should have looked at. But I guess my thinking on that is they had so much to deal with all what was going on that probably for the in relationship to how many people here, the small amount of people that it's like, do we really need to be wasting our time on that for such a small amount of people that are going to be inconvenienced? But to that person, it's a massive inconvenience. Like,
exactly. Yeah, that's the thing.
The one hotel we wasted like 4 hours trying to check in simply because you hadn't got a health code. And to be fair to the hotel, they did try for a long time. But then it seemed they came up with a sort of very poor excuse at the end, and they didn't even want to tell us, did they? Yeah, so basically, you couldn't stop.
One hotel, we ended up being there. We arrived at about 5:30 in the evening. We were hoping to just check in and go to the room and then head back out to do some things in the evening. And we ended up being there for three and a half hours before they came over and said, look, you can't stay here. And don't worry about getting them on there.
No, it's okay. I was just trying to work out how to do that. So
we obviously we weren't best pleased at that, but we could tell that they were trying very hard to get us to stay. However, this is one flaw with, I see, the way that the Chinese system, because people are very worried to make a decision, and it seems that it's always got to go to someone higher, and no one wants to take accountability. And because if say we were infected and we went into that hotel and that caused a little outbreak in that hotel, the person who made that decision is going to be held accountable for that.
Well, we saw this, didn't we? We went up the Shanghai Tower. If you follow our channel, we went up the Shanghai Tower because we did a live stream from the top of the tower. Now, when we went to buy the tickets earlier in the day, on that day to go up the Shanghai Tower, we spoke to the woman at the ticket kiosk, and initially she wasn't going to let us in because Oliver didn't have his health code. However, we explained all the information. We showed the stamps in our passport that we hadn't been outside of China for months. And she made some phone calls, and it was agreed that, you're allowed to go in and you can buy the ticket. So we purchased the tickets. When we came back to enter the tower after lunch, some 2 hours later, we got to the door, and the security guy on the door was flatly refusing to let us in. So no, foreigners are not allowed. You can't come in. And it wasn't until his boss eventually came down. We got his sort of supervisor or boss. They call them the leader over there. That he then verified our information. We were allowed to go in. And I think this is the thing, because that low-level security guy didn't want to make a decision that may have got him into trouble. But sometimes they're very reluctant to escalate the problem to the boss. It was actually sort of more luck that his boss come. He didn't call his boss or anything.
No.
The boss just happened to turn up. And I think it's because a lot of the sort of security jobs, in here are done by lower level people. And because they have this sort of top down chain of command, the sort of people at the bottom, they're given an instruction and that's final.
That's it.
They can't sort of use their own common sense, and they're a little bit reluctant to sort of go up the chain. And so this is an issue. But I just want to address, I've seen a couple of videos online where people are saying foreigners are getting discriminated against, and that there is some element of discrimination, but 90% of the time these things can be sorted out. But I think it's about relaying the information accurately. So the first clip I saw was of a place in Guangzhou, and the clip I saw, the people talking about this clip were saying it was a medical clinic, and they weren't allowing foreigners in to buy masks. Well, I know that place in Guangzhou because I lived in Guangzhou. It's not a clinic at all. It's actually a wholesale supplies place for medical equipment. And it did seem from the video that they were not letting foreigners in. I don't know the reason. And then the second clip, a foreigner was getting refused into another place. And from what I briefly saw of the clip, it seems that he didn't have the correct health code on his phone. Now, obviously, there's another big issue with foreigners here is a lot, like myself, I don't speak fluent Chinese. I speak a little bit. I can get by. But when you get these situations, it's very difficult for a foreigner to understand what they're being told. Like when we went to take the package to DHL on Friday, we had a kind of an issue. They wouldn't let us into the industrial estate where the DHL depot was. But once we sort of got the communication sorted out and they realized we actually got an Shenzhen code on our phone, they were fine, weren't they?
Yeah. And we had to I kind of came up with that idea that might be okay because I couldn't understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely true. There might be something that they're trying to help with, and it just gets lost in translation, and you might assume the worst, that you're being discriminated against, but they want to help you get this certain type of code or something like that. Yeah, that definitely could be the case sometimes. I just want to give a shout out here to Trevor Norman. Thank you very much for your question here. What do you think of the Fox News lies on the virus?
Yeah, well, I think the sort of US and I've also noticed the British government now, they're taking to China bashing. So they've ramped up their China bashing, and I can't help thinking, and I mentioned this in a video I did a couple of days, it may be trying to deflect from their own sort of lack of action. It's like, oh, instead of letting the people see how we've sort of failed a little bit and we haven't got things right, if we just keep blaming China, then it might deflect a little bit. But, you know, I think Fox News are one of these. They will constantly put out sort of inaccuracies to make them their own country look better and try to rubbish China. You know, I don't see a lot of these sort of news agencies, like, for example, I believe Jack Ma, along with the Chinese government, has just donated a huge amount of ventilators to New York because the governor of New York was having trouble getting ventilators from the federal government. The federal government apparently says, oh, you've already had enough. And the governor of New York says, no, we don't have enough. So he turned to China. And I see the UK government have also ordered ventilators from China and actually being criticised for doing that, which, you know, I just can't believe. I think in a time of crisis, you should be getting that equipment from anywhere you can. You shouldn't be thinking, oh, you know, straight away in the news, they go, oh, China are just doing this to, you know, as propaganda to make themselves look good. I don't believe that. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but who really cares? If you can get equipment from that country that's going to save lives, then I think that is a good thing. I think you've got to stop this finger pointing and blaming. You've all got to work together to sort the problem.
Yeah, I think it's madness to me to see so much politics going on when it's like, you know, something that's really a crisis for the whole world. You know, at a time like this, it shouldn't be, you know, let's not, you know, aid this economy, aid that economy, or let's keep our political, you know, side. It should be everyone works together, really. That's what you would hope. And just buy and sell off whoever you can, everyone to help each other to get over this. But, you know, we see it time and time again with buying from China is a problem and all this.
So, Paul, why did China lie to the WHO in January? Well, I think there's different views on this, and there's a couple of. I'll give a shout out to a channel of Nathan Rich. He did a timeline on this, and it's quite interesting. I've been working on compiling a timeline. I'm not there yet, but from what I can see, once they were aware of, you know, once they 100% confirmed person-to-person transmission, they did inform the WHO. What you have to remember, and the clues here in the name, it's a novel coronavirus, right? So when they first spotted this, they didn't know what it was. Yeah, they thought it was like SARS, but they weren't sure. So they launched an investigation, and that investigation was ongoing. As soon as they got the results from that investigation, and as soon as they sort of knew that there was a huge issue with person-to-person transmission, as far as I can see from the timeline I've done and other timelines I've seen, they did inform the WHO. Now, you know, what that time, there might have been a time lag of a few days, but, you know, I think it's very important in these situations that you can't make decisions on rumor or speculation.
That's what I was about to say.
You have to have hard facts. You know, to shut down an economy of 60 million people, you can't just say, oh, we've got 5 cases and we think it might pass from person to person.
Exactly.
Let's lock down a city of 60 million people. And this,
because if that person came out to be wrong,
the consequences are huge. And I even look at this now. You know, you look at other countries. You look at the UK, the USA, Europe. They have known far more about this virus than China did when it first started. Yet look how slow they have reacted to locking things down. So, you know, I think, there may be some, and I think more information will come out in the future when all this is over. But from the timelines I've looked at, I don't think there was a huge amount of delay.
Yeah, this is the thing. People like to compare to what a perfect world would be like, don't they? Instead of comparing to previous events like this or comparing to how other countries have dealt with it. You can't compare it to what the perfect situation would have been. Yeah, hindsight is a great thing. But at the time, only very little information was known about it. So again, you can't, take such massive decisions on rumor and speculation, because the consequences of that being incorrect are just, catastrophic. And again, especially with the top down leadership kind of thing,
Yeah, well, that is a problem, and I do hope that the authorities will look at that, because that can cause problems. Because what you have people who are lower down the chain is scared to sort of do things because they're worried that if they do make the wrong decision, they will get a bollocking from their superiors.
Yeah, so it's almost like it's got to go to the top guy every time.
Yes.
With a delay of time. But
yeah, so that does it. Okay, so Ji Wang, Detroit and New Orleans also need a donation. Please
thank you
help.
for your generosity there.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm not that familiar with American politics, but from what I observe and read and comments we get, it seems the sort of federal government in the US are not doing the best of jobs with this. And it seems to be that the more proactive state governors are getting sort of, doing more. Whereas, and there has been some accusation leveled that sort of the central administration under Donald Trump's sort of leadership are favoring states of the same political color as he is. I don't know how that's true or not. Maybe if there's any viewers from the USA watching, they could comment on that. But, I think in times of crisis, people should forget about politicizing things. People should forget about pointing the finger. Just get on and deal with the situation. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, in a perfect world, that would definitely be the case. Karen Shen, hope you still love to live in China. Absolutely. Please go and visit Chongqing soon.
Oh, Chongqing's on our list.
Yeah. I mean, I personally haven't been around China as much as I would have liked to yet, but I don't plan to leave anytime soon. So I definitely want to be visiting a lot of different places whilst I'm here.
Just to let you know, in one of our upcoming videos, many people keep saying to us in our comments, "Oh, come to my city, come to my city." And obviously, there's a massive amount of cities in China. So what we're going to do on one of our videos, we're going to do a poll, and then you can vote, and whatever comes out the top, that's the city we're going to go to.
Yeah, there's loads of places on the bucket list, really. I do want to visit, like, obviously the touristy stuff like Beijing, the wall, the Great Wall and stuff.
Maybe we can do a live stream from the People's Square in Beijing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
kind of cool.
Definitely. Now we've got that.
We've done one from the highest point, and yeah. But just back to the thing about foreigners here. So my local sort of shopping centre, which is literally 3 or 4 minutes walk from here, for the last month or two, I've had no problem going in and out. I show my Shenzhen code, and they take my temperature and going in. But I went there a couple of days ago, and they stopped me from going in. And I was actually with my partner, so it was a bit easier because obviously she can speak fluent Chinese. But they stopped me from going in, and even though I had my Shenzhen code, he still said, "No, you can't go in." So he says, "Look, I've always been here. I've got my Shenzhen code. I've been in China for sort of more than 2 months without leaving." He then radioed his superior, and after a sort of conversation for sort of 15, 20 seconds, he let me in. But, this just goes to show you how these sort of lower level people sort of,
some of them
it seems as though they don't use common sense. Maybe that's wrong. It's just, I think they're scared that if they make a mistake, they risk losing their jobs. And
so they'd rather just take the loss of face and go, "No, look, you
can't come in."
I just wanted to say a story that happened to a friend of mine a couple of days ago as well. So he was eating in a restaurant with his girlfriend, and they were in there for about an hour. Yeah, they just got let in, temperature check. The restaurant was quite busy. An hour later, in the middle of their conversation. He said that it was a really nice evening as well. He was having a great time. Someone came over and started talking to his girlfriend in Chinese, saying, look, we're not sure that your boyfriend's allowed to be in here. So he needs to provide us with this code. And we're going to do another temperature test. And he was really quite miffed at that, because not one person in there was asked to show this code, not even the Chinese people.
Mm-hmm.
It was just temperature check. And he was in there for an hour and it's fine. And then all of a sudden, and the only way they could have, gone for him and no one else is because of the race,
Yeah, so that's really a discrimination thing. But again, I think it comes down to this: it's each individual. So that club owner or that bar owner obviously had an issue, whereas another club owner
might
doesn't.
not have.
So it's about interpretation of the rules. I mean, there's as far as I'm aware, there's nothing from the sort of Shenzhen government that says foreigners can't go
that's
in
the
places.
thing. Yeah.
So I think it's this individual interpretation, and that can be a problem. And but I do think it's important, and being a bit older, I've learned through my life, sometimes don't sort of get too angry about it. Sometimes it's not an excuse, but it's like, look at it maybe that's there. Maybe just don't go back to that bar again.
Yeah,
ultimately they've lost out.
Yeah, you got to put yourself in the other, side as well. And the way I see it is that they've only been open to, foreigners being a part of their society for a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, breeding through the generations, it's going to take longer to accept all nationalities as being, in and a part of their life. So obviously, again, not excusing the behavior, because it is quite frustrating and disappointing sometimes. But I've always got to try and take a balanced view on it, and that could be, especially the older people, where maybe when they were younger, there wasn't even any foreigners in China.
That's right. Yeah.
They've grown up during this time, and their mindset is in that way of thinking.
Yeah, I think some of the older people just see that, we've got this isn't China now. Foreigners are bringing it back in. Where if they was to look at the facts a little bit more, that's actually not really the case.
Yeah, and a lot of them won't be looking at the statistics.
Sure, yeah, they'll just see a rumor off a friend, and it spreads. Oh, foreigners are bringing it back in.
Exactly.
So all of a sudden, 2 people are saying it's now 100,000 people are thinking that. So that there is this about it. So okay, particles in space. The anti-China sentiment is deeply rooted in the West. What do you think it will take to help reverse this? People like us, hopefully. I think it is a big problem, because the narrative of, in my opinion, the narrative of a lot of these countries is anti-China, because I think there's, a lot of these other countries see China as a threat economically. For so many years, Europe and especially America have been the sort of controlling force sort of in the world. And, you only look at sort of 15, 20 years ago, all these major world sort of forums and meetings, China wasn't even invited to the table. And you look now, and China's a major player at the table because of the way the economy's gone and how China have grown stronger. And I think they see that, certainly the US see that as a threat to their dominance, and they're very scared by that. And instead of fighting back against it, I think they should embrace it and work together for the good of the population of the world, really. I can't understand this sort of fighting. We went through this for years and years with Russia, and it didn't do anybody any good, really. So I think it's very difficult to change the mind, simply because the wave is so big. All the media is always, even
the media is the biggest problem, and it's not stopping, is it? It's getting worse.
You look at things in, something good happens in America and it's news. Something good happens in China, it's propaganda. I really find it hard to know how ultimately you change that narrative, because all the press is controlled by a very small group of wealthy people.
Yeah.
And if they're in the kind of, sort of group with the officials because they're funding their political parties and stuff. It's very difficult to sort of change that narrative, really.
And he also added, is there any dates finalized yet to allow foreigners back in? There's not yet. The decision was made. This decision was made on the 28th of March to no longer let foreigners in, and
I think they're going to review it every couple of weeks.
Because there's currently a 60-day extension on everybody's visa if you're in China and
you need to renew.
And you need to renew your period of stay. So currently that won't be up until 2 months after the 28th of March. So until it comes to that time, they'll obviously have a review again. And
I think and this is not an official word, but my personal opinion, I think they'll assess how well other countries are getting the situation under control. And I think as they see other countries getting the situation more under control, they will start opening up to those countries. And I think, one of the things people get nervous, if you look, I think two days ago, Shenzhen had 2 asymptomatic cases. And one was a person from the UK and one was a person from Hubei. And this is the biggest worry now in China is the asymptomatic cases. And if you look at many of the new cases every day, they are asymptomatic cases.
Yeah.
The good news, however, is that scientists in China researched have suggested that asymptomatic cases are much, much, much less likely to pass it on to other people than people who are showing symptoms. So there's a story of you may have heard in the news recently, and I know some people have put this on YouTube, but a sort of what's called a small town here in China, actually 600,000 people. So for European standards, that's big, but in China, that's quite small, got locked down. Now, the reason that was locked down, they found a doctor to be positive who was working in a local hospital. Now, this doctor had returned from Hubei province towards the end of January. And when he returned, he quarantined and he was tested as negative. Sort of a month later, he tested positive, and 2 of his colleagues and a friend were also tested positive. So that's why they locked down that town. And they are really on top of this here. The amount of testing they're doing is just huge. Even the slightest suspicion, your temperature might be 0.2 or 0.3 degrees over. Like you were just not even half a degree over it, and you got, and Oliver made a video about that. So they're really on top of testing, which seems to be somewhat different to other countries. Yeah,
just a mention here to Fluffing Stuff. Thank you very much for your donation. Beers on me, guys. Keep yourself safe. Can you guys imagine the outbreak started in the US or the UK instead of Wuhan? Hell will break loose, but people will still blame China because of reasons. Yeah, I mean, there was some research that came out as to, how do you call it, like the first sort of identification.
The RNA.
The RNA maybe not from Wuhan, right? One of the places was Shenzhen. And another place was Washington. Yeah. So I don't know, that was a couple of weeks ago, that research. So I don't know the follow-up on that as of yet.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of conspiracy theories going around about this coronavirus, and some may have some basis, and there's others that are totally just ridiculous. In my opinion, the one about 5G is just totally ridiculous. But there's a group of people out there pushing that. Oh, China was one of the first countries to get 5G. That's why,
I mean, I say I do agree with you, but you can't shut it down completely without evidence.
All these things need more research, but as I say, there are, and just to address the wet markets thing. Now, there's this sort of belief in the West that all wet markets, and wet markets is not always the right word. It got the word wet markets because there's a lot of live fish. China is not like the West, where you go into a supermarket and the fish is all cut up nicely and packaged nicely and you buy it like this, because by the time it gets to that super, it's probably 2 or 3 days old. So here in China, people
They're swimming around, right?
Yeah, pretty much they buy their fish live. But I think people have got to, not in the West, not confuse these wet markets with these wild and endangered species markets. Some of them do sell both. But in a lot of cities, a wet market is a market that sells fruit, vegetables, chicken, and fish. Now, most of those markets, the fish and the prawns will be live, but most of the other, the chickens and that are not live. In some of them, the chickens will be live and they slaughter them. But it tends to be in more rural places. And I won't pretend it doesn't go on. There is a lot of these endangered species, but I think it's important to say not all wet markets have all these endangered species.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a misconception, because the local one here is just very, normal things that you would eat in,
That's
anywhere.
right. We go to our local wet markets, fruit, vegetables, meat. Now, just on the hygiene, they're not the most hygienic of places.
No, they're really not. They're really not.
But when we talk about people touching, handling meat with their hands, of course, when they get home, they also wash that meat. But something that always strikes me, I've spent about 8 years in China, and I've suffered food poisoning less while I've been in China than I have in the UK. And I think this is really down to how we cook meat. So in the UK, we generally get a large piece of meat and we cook it at maybe 180, 200 over the period of a couple of hours slowly. Now, certain meats like pork and chicken, if you heat it up to a certain temperature and don't go hot enough, then it breeds bacteria in that meat.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas here, they cook meat
everything
very, very thin and small. And they generally cook it in a wok. And anybody who's been to China will confirm this, right? Their gas ring here, it's not kind of like in the UK where you've got a low and a medium light. It's like off, or it's like a jet engine. Yeah. So when they cook the meat, they cook it at much, much higher temperature than we do in this. I think that has some sort of thing what obviously kills bacteria instead of breeding bacteria, where we cook it more like warm. I can only go off my own experience, and as I say, I've probably had food poisoning 2, maybe 3 times in China in 8 years.
I must say, I've the only time I've ever had food poisoning was here, and it's the most ill I've ever been that I can remember. So it's different with different people.
Yeah, the hygiene is not like UK standards of food. Even in the supermarkets, it's not. Some are, but it's just not. So you do have to take it. But as I say, I have not suffered as much here as I have in the UK. I've had food poisoning numerous times in the UK, from spaghetti bolognese, from pork, going to restaurants because it's been maybe warmed up and it's bred bacteria. And you don't tend to get that as much here.
Thank you to Ronald Kim. We are trying to get through these super chat questions. We will absolutely answer them all. We're just backed up a little bit here. Ronald Kim, how most locals in China respond or handle whenever they hear biased news about China. How most locals in China respond or handle whenever they hear biased news about China. A lot of the people that we speak to that speak very good English, they are very aware of this, negatively biased news towards China. And, we were talking to some people at the DJI place, and a lot of them actually laugh. I don't know what they did laugh, because some of the things were just so ridiculous, wrong, ridiculous, and so swayed towards, the America's political bias that they actually thought it was laughable. And like, that's how we find it sometimes. And the people who have never been here, they will read that and think, oh, it must be true. Especially the people who have never been really outside their country. They're very easily persuaded and very gullible to this type of media. So
I think what you've also got to remember is a lot of Chinese people are aware that their government is not perfect. They're absolutely aware that there's faults, but they believe that the government, a majority of the time, will enact policies that are good for a majority of the people. You're never going to please all of the people all of the time. And in fact, in a couple of weeks, we've got an interview with a Chinese person. It's about an hour and a half interview where we spoke about a lot of these things. Currently, we're just getting translation onto that. But once that's done, that will be up on our channel. And that was a very, very interesting conversation.
Yeah, so keep your eyes
keep your eyes open for that.
Peter Song, thank you very much for your generosity there. Solar Flare, that's the second time coming in with another question.
Solar Flare.
China sends supplies to help and gets vilified.
Yeah.
Do Western countries want China to stop?
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
I mentioned this a little bit earlier. As I said, I can't believe that, China are donating. So you look at some of the big businessmen here, like Jack Ma of Alibaba, Pony Ma of Tencent, I can't remember his name, the guy from JD.com. They've all got initiatives going on to donate from China, and also, the Chinese government are stepping in. But all they get accused of from the West is, they're just doing it as propaganda to make themselves look good. I don't necessarily believe that. I think they genuinely are, because a lot of countries offered help to China when they were having their critical moment. And I think that they're just paying that back. It's in every country's interests to get on top of this,
Yeah, for the world economy.
When the virus was big here, it was hurting China. Now it's in other countries, it's still hurting China because world economies can't get going again. So, all the countries now should be working together, not sort of trying to score political points. And I think it's crazy that countries are trying to score political points, not only against from one country to another, but even internally. You look at the political fight in America. Gladly, I'm not seeing so much of it in the UK, but that may be because one of the parties is going through a new leadership election. I believe they've just elected a new leader of the Labour Party in the UK. So maybe they will start sort of fighting between themselves again. But it is good to see that not a lot of that is happening in the UK at the moment, but it's certainly happening in the US. But just going back to reiterate, at this time, I really don't think countries should be fighting and trying to score points over each other. Let's just get on top of the virus and get it sorted out.
Yeah, Paul Theriot, I do apologise if I'm butchering the names here. I'm actually not aware of what Walfeng Electronic is. Do you know anything about that?
Walfeng Electronic. Now, Paul, could you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I'm not aware of that.
But thank you for your donation anyway. We've got another one down here that, here we go.
Okay, so...
From a Wuhan girl living in Cambridge, US, living in a foreign country during lockdown, sometimes it can feel physically isolating and emotionally lonely. Do you guys ever feel lonely and scared too? Talking personally from this, I was lucky enough to, have my girlfriend staying with me for the whole time. So I wasn't, but even then, it does get quite lonely because I would say I'm quite an extroverted person. And not being able to go out for the best part of 2 months was, taking its toll after a while. Again, luckily enough, we were cracking down on YouTube stuff. So we were keeping very busy during this time, which was occupying a lot of my time and, my thinking. So I didn't have too much time to just be completely alone, which I was very fortunate. But we're very aware, especially, elder people, they might be alone in their house and, not be able to speak to someone for a long time, which can definitely, take its toll after a while. So it's nice to see. I saw a funny thing in the UK where there was a WhatsApp group created for this street, right? And there was quite a lot of older people. And one of them said in the WhatsApp group that they were getting quite lonely. So all of the people on the street, they put out a deck chair in the street and kept social distancing.
Sat in their garden.
And they sat having a cup of tea in the street, just like kind of keeping a company, which things like this are nice to do. And I've got some friends at home, bless them, that are like volunteering to go and take food shopping to elder people's houses and just like, talk to them at the door a bit, because this is like the only interaction they're getting with real people. So I
think we just need to give a little bit of a shout out actually to the people of Wuhan. and especially the medical workers there. Wuhan, I think.
Well, the medical workers are all over.
Yeah, all over. But I think Wuhan especially made a sacrifice for the greater good of China.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah,
I think if they didn't enact what happened in Wuhan now, we had a lockdown in other provinces, China, but it was nowhere near as strict as Wuhan.
No.
And I think they made a sacrifice. If they hadn't have done that in Wuhan and the sort of wider Hubei province, the situation would have been a lot worse. And I think this is why now you get a lot of Westerners who just don't believe the figures of China because they've seen what's happening. America now have 250,000 confirmed cases.
Yeah,
the
insane.
UK yesterday had over 700 deaths. Italy were getting over 1,000 deaths a day. And I think this is because they haven't enacted a strict lockdown. It was pretty strict here. And the other thing on top of that is the people's mindset here, which again, you made a video about, is very different. The people here were really, really, I didn't see any groups of people congregated in China whatsoever. No. I see even now in the UK and the government are talking that if people don't start to comply, especially younger people in the UK don't comply, they're going to have to make the lockdown more strict because people are still not complying. And that's something that just didn't happen here. People complied pretty much from day one.
Yeah, and
I see no groups here.
That's not just because they're taking the government's advice. That's because they are terrified of getting ill themselves.
Yeah.
So even if the government, I think even if the government didn't advise, look, you need to stay at home, most people would have taken it upon themselves to do that anyway.
Well, they did here.
Yeah.
I mean, even before there was sort of big announcements, even in the very early days, literally within 3 days, it went from maybe 10 or 15% of the people in Shenzhen wearing masks to literally everybody wearing masks.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was like an extra 20% a day.
Yeah.
And
even now, if you go out, I occasionally will leave my apartment. Oh, I forgot my mask.
Yeah, you feel out of place.
You feel weird. Oh my God! Everybody's going to be looking and staring at me and thinking I'm the bad one.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like we just mentioned earlier, foreigners are seen now as a little bit discriminated against because they see all the foreign countries. So if you're a foreigner without a mask, they perceive, oh my God, look at this stupid foreigner.
Definitely.
He's not obeying the rules, or so it is a big thing.
China Teacher Brand, thank you very much. We'll have to definitely look into that. We can have you on our podcast channel. Appreciate that. Definitely. We can look into that. We've got some more coming in. Felix Chen, what's the main source of information for foreigners in China? Do you experience any problems getting updated on the requirements, advice from the government?
Not at all.
I'd say it's obviously probably not as quickly to get. It's not as quick to get to us foreigners who don't speak Chinese, but very quickly it does get to us because there's a lot of WeChat groups here, and this is something that's a bit different from the UK. There's a lot of big WeChat groups with a lot of people that big news gets spread about in them. So very quickly you get updated on the the government advice and the requirements and things like that.
I've got a Shenzhen Daily, and they put out in English all the announcements. And also even the official Shenzhen. I don't know about all of the cities and provinces, but I guess all the big cities and provinces, the Shanghais, the Guangzhous, and that. Certainly in Shenzhen, I receive official announcements, and they're both in Chinese and in English. And Shenzhen Daily also does a really good job of putting out announcements in English as well.
Yeah,
so I don't have
there's not really a problem there at all. Trevor Norman, thank you. Thank you for your generosity there. We've got another question. God, thank you so much for everybody tuning in right now. It's been going for an hour now, so we'll go for about another 20 minutes or 25 minutes.
Go for another half an hour or so,
Yeah, so if you want to get your questions in, get it done in that time. So appreciated that you stayed in China during the quarantine time. Obviously, your trust in China really paid off now. Oh, massively. I mean, it's mad to think that, like 2 months ago, everyone's messaging saying, get out of China, because people are worried about you.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a lot of foreigners did rush to leave, and now that has massively kicked them in the ass,
Backfired on
because,
them, really. Yeah.
you know, I've got a friend that went to Thailand, and he, you know, to get away from the quarantine rules over here, because things were still open over there. And now it's gotten so bad that he's not even allowed out of his building. And that's for everybody in Thailand. You're not allowed out of your building. And, you know, he's paying for an apartment there because he can't get back to China, and he's not even allowed to leave the building. So
I think as well, you know.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And you have to pay for your treatment now. If you come back and you catch the coronavirus, you have to pay for your own treatment. Whereas we are luckily covered by the government. If we fall ill with that virus, we're covered. Because I had a coronavirus test when it was about 3 weeks ago. I did make a video on it. I was half a degree over when they temperature checked me in the taxi, and they ended up, you know, taking me to the hospital, coronavirus testing me, and I was luckily wasn't infected, and all of that was free of charge.
Yeah, I just want to add something to that. When it first broke out, I was really concerned, and I was concerned for Oliver also, and the reason why, probably a lot of you don't know this, but we both suffer from asthma. And obviously, as a sort of chest and lung infection, you get it's a lot worse if you're asthmatic. But I sort of took the decision, right? I have, you know, a kind of family here, and I think it's wrong, you know, for me to go running off back to the UK. Obviously, I'm very worried about my family now in the UK. You know, at the time it kicked off, all our UK family was saying, "Oh, you know, you need to come back. You need to come back." And we took this decision not to do that. And one of the other, you know, factors that played into that is we thought it would be dangerous to travel at that time because, you know, it was better to isolate in our apartment, which we did. As Oliver says now, there's a lot of people who probably very much regret that decision that they left China, because now they can't come back, and the virus is running rampant in some of those other countries.
A bit, you know, the title of this live stream, foreigners are completely, the door is shut to China, right? Yeah. I'm very intrigued to see how long that's going to stay for, because I really don't think, like here, right, they got over the situation within about 2 months. Obviously the virus is still here, but it got under control. It got brought under control within about 2.5 months. Yeah. Whereas that was because of the, you know, unprecedented precautions that have been taken by the government and the citizens, right? In the UK, everywhere else, you know, these precautions are not being taken seriously. You know, people are going out and mixing, even when.
So it'll keep spreading.
So it's going to keep spreading. And this is only going to get, only unless, you know, everyone in the population gets immunity by catching it, or there's a vaccine that's being rolled out nationwide.
Well, vaccine's still some way off.
Exactly. You know? So I don't see this getting under control until everybody's vaccinated. So I'll be intrigued to see when China goes, oh, actually, yeah, we're going to open the doors now to foreigners, because why would they shut it now but then open it up when there's still a massive risk?
I think they will wait till other countries have got it under control. Okay, Trevor, thank you for that. When I was in China, food handlers all wore gloves and masks. Is it still the same? Yes, absolutely. It's only within the last week or so that restaurants have actually allowed you to sit back inside. It went to a takeaway food, but I'll just give a little story. Went to a restaurant about a week ago with my partner. Go in the restaurant. First of all, we have to show our Shenzhen code to say that we're good. We haven't been to an area where Hubei or Wuhan or out the country. So that's the first thing. Secondly, they took our temperature on the way in. All the staff were wearing masks and gloves. They sat us about 1.5 meters apart. So instead of having, say, 50 tables in the restaurant, they've now got 25. All the staff had masks and gloves on, and they even gave us these little sort of plastic bags when we went in. So when we took our mask off to eat, we could put our mask inside
really?
those bags at
I've
the
not seen that
table.
before.
So there's these, there's a lot of precautions being taken. And I think that we have a friend, you probably know him, Daniel Dumbrill. Some of you may watch his channel. He has a bar here. And he was saying the amount of things that the government have to inspect before he's allowed to open. There's a whole list. He has to have disinfectants. He has to take temperatures of everybody going in and out, and all these kind of things. So there are a lot of precautions still in place. Now, just to also let you guys know, Shenzhen is one of the sort of places where it could easily kick off again because there's a huge amount of migrant workers. Shenzhen's a pretty unique city in that there's actually not many local Shenzhen people in Shenzhen.
It's only been a city for about 20 years.
30
right?
years ago, it was a little fishing village. So a lot of the people from all over China come back to here. So just about a week ago, the first planes and coach loads and trains, loads of people from Hubei province started coming back. And they're doing this in a very sort of controlled manner. They're not just letting everybody rush back. They're opening up Hubei sort of area at a time, and they're checking them, and then once they're clear to go, they're letting them leave Hubei. So they are doing it a very, very controlled. Obviously, there's a lot of nervousness that it could break out again very easily. So they are.
That's why they're doing it bit by bit as well. Some people are asking me what's life like back here again, and asking me, what are you allowed to do nowadays? And I would say, personally, my life is pretty much back to normal. I'm doing everything I can do, just sort of taking precautions still, and being wary of it. The only things that aren't yet open are schools, universities. I don't think cinemas, things where a lot of people are getting together. Even bars have started to open now over this past week or two. So it's only like, big events, cinemas and schools that are yet still shut. But they're, like you just said, they're going to be opening universities first, and then high schools, and then sort of kindergarten, go down the line and sort of test, is it okay to push it one step further? And if they start getting an outbreak again, I'm sure they'll roll it back. So yeah, they're keeping on top of it massively.
Absolutely, yeah.
So something's come on. I do apologize, I can't read your name here, but just beating those countries that blame China like the US did, and then they will know how to talk with Big Brother. I'm not exactly sure. Just beating those countries. Yeah, I guess you're saying a lot of countries were blaming China to start with, and then they kind of thought it wasn't going to be their problem. It's not going to, we don't have to take it too seriously.
Yeah, I think the way I feel, I think a lot of people say, it's a problem at the other side of the world. It's not going to affect us.
Yeah.
And so I just blame China. And then now I feel a lot of countries are blaming China to try and hide their own incompetencies in dealing with it. It's always easy to blame somebody else for your own sort of incompetencies.
MC, sorry to hear your stories in Shanghai. I hope things improve when the current situation becomes a new norm. Do you think that China will get a second wave? That's interesting. A lot of people are asking about that.
Yeah.
And like we just said, it kind of rolls back to what we just said. They are rolling things out little bit by little bit. And now that they've shut the door to foreigners, and, obviously you've still got Chinese nationals coming back from, badly affected countries. So it's always definitely a possibility, but they are making sure people quarantine for the specific amount of time when they do come back. And they are very strict on those rules. So if you can't just do like in the UK where you get advised to, and if you get a lot of undereducated people that have this don't care attitude, where they know they've got a cough, they know they're sneezing, but they'll still go, oh, it doesn't matter, I can do what I want. You can't do that here. So, and I think
people don't do that here anyway.
People don't do that. Well, look, you might get some, but that we don't know. We are in a very educated city.
I think people do tend to think a little bit more about that than I know
about the community. UK, you are right. Of course, there are going to be people that do
daughter,
think like that.
She's a community, she's a community healthcare worker, and she says she's been back to, and there's people who come into the office and they're coughing and sneezing, and it's like, oh well,
yeah,
they don't really sort of seem to have a problem with that, and that's a. bit sort of mad, really.
Something one of my friends sent me overnight. I just couldn't believe it. It's a furniture store, The Range in the UK.
Oh yeah,
it's a
yeah.
furniture
They
store.
haven't closed, have they?
They haven't closed, and there was a queue of about 50 people outside waiting to get into The Range, and there's nothing. To my mind, there's nothing in there that you could consider emergency supplies.
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
a furniture, houseware kind of store. They were keeping social distancing in the queue, but it just like, why are people prioritizing going out without a mask, without taking precautions, just to get these things that are completely non-essential?
Yeah, well, I
crazy.
read, so I don't know whether it was from the government or whether it was just comments of people there. Home decoration stores should stay open because people will want to do home decorating while they're quarantining. So, like you say, there's crowds of people going to these home flipping improvement stores to buy paint and wallpaper and stuff. You think, is it really worth the risk of catching it and risking your life?
Not even just
to
that,
paint
though.
the walls, you know.
The one thing that, for me anyway, I don't even think of it as like myself getting infected. I think of it as myself having it for maybe 14 days without knowing, and then passing it to you and other people whilst I've got it. So that's the thing I think about the most, and I think that's what most people should be thinking about. There's a very eye-opening statistic, because sometimes it's hard to. I think people don't take it as seriously because they don't think outside the box and think, oh, the ripple effect of me infecting other people it could cause someone to die. They don't even think of it on that level. They just think, because they can't see it happening, it doesn't really matter. But there was an eye-opening statistic that came out that said, if you're infected and you see 10 people, the ripple effect of that infecting other people, someone is going to die.
Of course,
if you see 10 people and you're infected, most likely someone is going to die.
I think also in a lot of these sort of foreign countries outside of China, there's this sort of misnomer that, it's only something that affects older people. Now, yeah, the statistics show it is worse for older people, but we're also seeing now statistics from Europe and the US that there are a significant number of younger people dying, and very sadly, the news this morning is that a 5-year-old child died in the UK. And that, when you start getting, kids, well, anybody, but, it especially pangs you in your heart when a 5-year-old, his life's taken away from him before his life's even really started, and so it's not just old people. Of course, old people are more susceptible to becoming critically ill from it or severely ill, but it is still affecting a lot of young people. So you do have to bear that in mind too.
Yeah, well, thank you for everyone joining in here. We've got, this is madness. We don't expect this many people to tune in. It's really great to see everybody conversing in the comments and stuff like that. So just going to give a shout out to a few people here. We've got Wimpa, we've got, sorry if I'm butchering the names here, some of them are quite difficult to pronounce. Joe Guo, thank you for joining us. Echo Shadow, Tyan. There's a lot of Chinese names that I can't pronounce. Apologize about that. Ascendant Chaos, Bath, Felix Chen, thank you guys for joining. Let us know where you're coming in from as well, because we have tried to accommodate for the largest proportion of our viewers that we see on the analytics on our channel. So if especially if you're coming in from Europe, because right now it's very early hours there. So we appreciate you doing that. We are going to be releasing this video onto YouTube. So if you aren't able to sort of watch the rest of it or what have you, you are able to catch up on that on YouTube. And that was one thing we weren't able to do in the previous live stream that we were in. So it's nice to because sometimes you can't make it, right? So it's good to be able to accommodate for more people. But we are thinking about in future to bring some guests on, aren't we?
We are, yeah.
So we want to do a weekly live stream ourselves. We're going to experiment with the times and then try and keep it at the same time as much as possible once we find the right time. But then we want to know what if you would like to see a second live stream per week or maybe bi-weekly, where we either invite somebody here or we'll do it online with them and sort of, talk amongst ourselves. So let us know in the comment section if that's something you'd like to see. We are going to try and sort of accommodate for as many time zones as we can. Maybe we'll do the other live stream at a slightly different time of day so that, you know, as many of you can join as possible. But we will be ending up the stream here in the next sort of 5 to 10 minutes. So if you want to ask us any questions, make sure to get them in. We do have the WeChat screen, the WeChat QR code on the screen as well.
That's really because we are aware that people in China can't access Super Chat.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you wish to support us, we have got the WeChat code.
So we do.
And we really appreciate that support. You know, we are pretty much do YouTube as our full-time thing.
Yeah.
So any support is really appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just as for the WeChat thing, we have tried to make it so you can ask a question, but that is limited to 30 characters on there. So we aren't able to take questions on WeChat. So we do incredibly appreciate all of you supporting us over there as well.
If you are Chinese and you want to put, because we'll be leaving the video up online after, if you do want to ask a question, if you drop it in the comments, we can get back to them.
Between us, we read
pretty much all the comments.
Obviously, there's a lot, so you can't get back to them all, but we do read all of the comments.
Yeah.
So
just something I'd like to mention as well, unlike some YouTubers, we don't sort of delete comments that are negative. YouTube does have filters, so if you put swear words or a very abusive in there, it will block them, and that's not our issue. You know, we don't sort of control that. But generally, if it's a well-structured criticism, I have no problem with that.
I really enjoy a constructive criticism comment coming in, because it gives it, you know, everybody lives this world in a different way and has a totally different perspective on the things that you're talking about. So when someone comes at me with something that, you know, gives me something to think about from a different perspective, it's valuable. You know, I enjoy reading these and sort of conversing in the comments.
Thank you very much, Karen.
Yeah, appreciate that. We've got two more.
Personally, I don't have time for these people who just put abusive comments with no construction. I have no time whatsoever for them. But if somebody has a genuine constructive criticism, I'll always try to get back to them.
Elo Road, why is the resolution of the live stream quite low? Is it just me? We are actually using, we've bought a capture card to be able to use a DSLR camera here. So we were hoping that the resolution was going to be good, but we have realized that the software that we're using to stream through to YouTube doesn't actually allow 1080p, and we're not quite sure why.
I think something else that might play into that, some of these platforms, and I know YouTube are one of these, because they have such a high demand at the moment.
Yeah, that's true. They might be lowering.
They're lowering their streaming capacity because so many people are at home watching the internet. It's causing their systems a bit of an issue. So I do believe they have lowered the quality a little bit.
Yeah, I think you might be right there. So maybe after this,
I know Netflix have as well.
Yeah, it's hard to believe how many, you know, more people are using internet bandwidth right now. Like, I've had so many people message me from home asking me to sort of play games with them because they're all just at home trying to fill their time. So
just on that, there's obviously a lot of companies and a lot of people suffering from a point of view of jobs and their businesses because of this outbreak. But there is a sort of bright light in there for some companies. Like, I see some tech companies are employing more people simply because the demands on things like streaming and group working from home software and things like that and gaming companies as well. Apparently the UK has seen a massive surge in the game sales.
You can imagine, can't you?
People are staying at home and playing video games.
Tangue, thank you very much for your generosity.
Appreciate
the super
that.
Sticker there. One thing I just wanted to touch on as well is that this, you get forced into doing new things when you're in a tough situation, don't you? So there's a lot of people, like, I've spoke to somebody here that I went to talk to, and him and his partner, she's a dancer and he's a singer, so all of their, you know, work is performing for others, right? And they weren't able to do that for a long time, and, you know, they've got overheads, they've got bills to pay.
Yeah, of course.
So they were forced into a difficult situation, which is very unfortunate. But he said, look, I'm looking at it from the optimistic side. I've learned how to cook. I've learned how to make websites. I've learned how to, you know, teach online, teach how to
Yeah.
sing online.
So the
And-
moral here is use your time effectively.
Yeah.
Don't just sit at home and waste your time. Think about things. I also read that there's a lot of like personal trainers. And they've all started to do online stuff because people are sitting at home. You can do personal training in your home. So a lot of these trainers have gone online, and there's other businesses which well, even to a point of us.
Exactly.
We haven't been able to do other things, so we've really sort of concentrated and put a lot more effort into our.
And we've seen the results.
And we've seen some results. Now, unfortunately, a lot of our videos, YouTube have a policy where they limit or demonetize a lot of videos talking about coronavirus. So we have fell to that a bit.
Definitely,
but we've been helped by the support of viewers and that, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. You thanks to you all, you're able to keep this going, and hopefully we can make this a full-time job as soon as possible. And we are sort of working on it full-time at the moment. So
we've got loads of things in the pipeline with what we want to show you, other cities in China. We want to show you so many other things. Little bit limited while the sort of virus things going on, but after that we've got loads of plans in the pipeline, haven't we?
Yeah, we've currently got like 10 to 12 videos that we filmed in Shanghai ready to be edited, and we'll be rolling those out over the next month or two. You might start thinking we're in Shanghai for 2 months, but we are actually back in Shenzhen right now.
We're also making a big effort. Due to you guys helping us, we've now been able to sort of employ somebody on a kind of part-time basis to help us get translations onto our videos, because we know we have a lot of Chinese viewers. There's a lot of Chinese community all around the world who like to watch our videos. So we are trying to, we think at least 50 to 70% of our videos will have translation on when we release them.
Yeah, and for you Chinese watching, we have had a lot of people say, you need to be getting onto Chinese platforms, and that is also in the pipeline. We are looking to do that in the very near future, and we will let you know when we do that. I think we're ready to sort of wrap this up here.
Yeah.
We have just had somebody put in a super chat. Thank you very much, James Lee. Good work, guys. Enjoy watching your channel.
Thank you very much,
Yeah,
James.
we appreciate that. We're going to sort of we keep pumping videos out we're trying to get every 2 days at the moment. So yeah, just stay tuned. There's a lot more stuff in the pipeline, and thank you all so much for tuning in.
Appreciate it.
The support has been amazing.
Thank
so
you.
We'll definitely be doing more and more of these in the coming weeks. And like I said before, if you would like to see a second one per week or bi-weekly, let us know, because I'll put a community post up after this and see how many of you would like that.
Maybe you could also put in the comments on the video if there's any guests you would like to actually see, and we can sort of reach out to them and try and get them on. I've got a couple in mind, but obviously they have to be willing to want to do that. So we will be reaching out to some people to see if they want to come on. And if there's, but as I say, if there's any that you would like to recommend, just put that in the comments.
Yeah, that's right. That would be very helpful. Anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in. We will be leaving now, and I think we're going to go head off and make a video.
We are, yeah. So see you next time.
Just a quick shout out there, Wei Hua Shi. Thank you so much for the generosity there.
Appreciate
and we will see you in the next live stream. Take care.
Take care, as
Bye-bye.
always.